Hello, my name is Justin Littlewood, and this Vodcast investigates the role of the teacher in a mathematics classroom to inspire and promote curiosity and learning within a lesson. The article I've chosen describes the results of an experiment where 3 teachers attempted to have new concepts and adjusted their roles in order to see the effect it would have on students' learning. The experiment arose due to an issue seen in classrooms where students would only work too independently. They would rarely engage in voluntary discussion, and the teacher would seldom initiate a mathematical discussion within the class. Hence, the aim of this study was essentially to find out the role of the teacher and discover ways in which mathematics teachers can encourage their students to engage in key activities for raising their mathematical level. These key activities include showing, explaining, justifying, and reconstructing one's work. The teachers who were observed for the experiment had initially perceived working with peers as just an option, as something that was tolerated, as opposed to being enthusiastically promoted. They also missed critical opportunities to begin mathematical discussions between students. Also, within their classrooms, students, while working independently, would ask the teacher for help, and naturally, the teacher would help them, giving what was essentially hints for their learning. And these helpful pointers were considered to be crucial for the students' learning. So, to attempt to design a resolution to these subtle issues, 3 teachers assumed a new role and adopted a new strategy within their classroom. The first teacher opted to design an in-class assessment that was to be completed in groups. This assessment was successful in creating an atmosphere which was foundational for discussion between students. It also allowed the performance of the previously discussed key activities, as students were easily able to show, explain, justify, and reconstruct their work. There was also the fact that they received a mark for their work, which allowed them to successfully and effectively evaluate it. The teacher did supervise choosing the members of the group to avoid issues, but this also did stimulate discussion. This assessment therefore served as a vital tool in coercing students to perform key activities and get insight into their own thinking processes. The students' solution-finding processes were made evident both for the teacher and the student alike. The second teacher chose to intentionally cease from providing help to a pair of students asking for it, but instead she would encourage them to discuss the problem with each other in depth. This approach proved to be increasingly difficult for many teachers, as they have a tendency and a passion for explaining things to students. It also had the potential to spark unusual and off-topic discussions between small groups of students. However, it was indeed successful in forcing students to not only engage in the content themselves, but also engage in maths-related discussion. The third teacher escalated again in drawing explanations from the students. She explicitly requested of a student who had never previously been expected to explain his or her work to a group of peers. This interesting strategy consequently sparked a rare discussion between a group of students, where those who would usually adopt the explaining role were the listeners, and the one who would usually listen was the explainer. By asking the weaker student to explain, the teacher emphasized the fact that explaining the work is far more important than simply providing the correct answer. It practically showed the students that they could accentuate their own learning by explaining their work and engaging once again in the previously discussed key activities of showing, explaining, justifying, and reconstructing one's work. So what can we take out of these experiments that were conducted? One helpful pointer that we can definitely extract from the experiment is the importance of group discussion within a mathematics classroom. There are some strategies that have arisen as a result of the experiment, which can assist a teacher in implementing discussion into their classroom. These include avoiding explaining but promoting discussion. If a student is working independently and finds themselves stuck on a question and seeks the teacher for assistance, rather than instantly gifting them this advantageous hint, encourage them to discuss with a peer who also may be struggling before coming back to ask you. Another role of the teacher is to initiate group assessments into the lesson plans by simply constructing an assessment that requires students to formulate and work in groups can easily provoke group discussion. This assessment does not necessarily have to be summative, but as long as students realize the importance and effectiveness of group discussion, this assessment has achieved its purpose. Lastly, to promote explanations or discussions to be led by weaker students. In a classroom environment, there are generally students who are more prominent in leading discussions and sharing their findings. Conversely, there are also students who avoid leading such discussions. By encouraging these less prominent students to lead out in the discussions, it can simultaneously improve the learning experience of that student, also show them the importance of the key activities, and it can portray the importance of listening to others' opinions to the more prominent students. There are a few things that I have learned as a result of engaging with this professional reading and research. One of these things is that it is my duty and role as a teacher to facilitate the learning of students in my mathematics classroom. It is my responsibility to find new ways to improve the learning environment within my classroom, and that experimenting new methods is an effective way of learning what does and what doesn't work. I have learned that classroom discussions are an excellent way of engaging students with the key activities of showing, justifying, explaining, and reconstructing their work, and that it is my role to initiate such discussion in my classroom. Some challenges that I confronted while analysing this article was the length of the article. It was quite long, which made it difficult to decide which aspects of the article I wanted to focus on. It was also a challenge finding an article that was applicable to the topic that I chose. So there are some challenges. Overall, I hope that this vodcast has been helpful in partly answering the question of what the role of the teacher is in a mathematics classroom. And it also has enlightened you into some new ideas about teaching maths. Thank you.